We can edit that out! We can edit that out! We can edit that out!
Nailed it. Do we do this every time?
Oh, we started. I don't know. We start, I guess. You know, we can edit that out with Rob and Jack. I'm Jack.
I'm Rob. Last episode, we were going to talk about our misspent youth or our childhood.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
So I assume you came very well prepared for talking about these things.
No, I didn't. How about you?
I didn't really either. I spent most of my adult life repressing my childhood, so maybe maybe this was just a way to sort of keep that tradition going.
Yeah. I'd like to say I had a lot going on this week, but I really didn't. Maybe that's part of the problem. You know, we're in the middle of a pandemic with so much free time. It's hard to figure out what the hell to do with it. You know.
Yeah.
Like a creative block on life.
A creative block on life?
Is that a thing?
I mean, I guess it is now.
Okay. I mean, you can have a creative block like writing and drawing and making music and stuff, but maybe you can also have a creative block on living, because some people's lives are their art project. Situationism, performance art.
Tell me more.
No. I didn't come prepared.
Do you get creative block often?
Well, since I am kind of a blockhead, you would think so, but I don't really have creative block as much as I just have straight up being lazy, you know? I think part of being creative is just the act of doing it. I think a lot of times it takes a lot to get to that point where you're just doing it. Because if I'm drawing or painting or anything like that, first step is usually taking out your brushes or your pencils and your paper, you know, but sometimes it's really hard to get to that point. It's kind of like running. It's really a difficult thing to just go running, but if you start putting your running shoes on and your running pants and your running shirt and all your running paraphernalia, then by the time you got everything on, you feel kind of stupid if you're just sitting there in your apartment. So you kind of have to run. Know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Yeah. I think a lot of creativity is just the act of I think everybody's creative in general. I think a lot of people just don't know how to start, you know?
For me, at least, trying to write a song when I'm experiencing creative block can be really difficult because, I could just start strumming chords or something, but I feel like I always at least have this innate pressure to come up with a really good beginning, come up with a really good first verse. And if I don't have that immediate spark, it makes me not even want to try. So I'll just keep myself from starting.
Well, I mean, there's one thing in creative writing classes is where they do automatic writing. You sit down and if you have nothing to write, you just write over and over again. I have nothing to write about. I have nothing to write about. You know, until you get to the point where you get bored of doing that and you actually start writing. For me, sometimes I do automatic drawing where I will just take a piece of recycled paper and some big markers and just start making a mess on the paper, just to listening to the music or having a conversation with somebody and just make a mess just to start the active part of it. So I'm wondering if there's like something related to that with music where you could just write a song. Okay, well, part of it is just starting with the first chords, just start strumming and then automatic strumming.
I guess like maybe the other side of that with music is if I'm feeling really uninspired and I can't create something, I'll maybe start learning one of my favorite songs and learn how to play that.
Yeah, I'll do that sometimes. I'll copy master art every once in a while. You know, sometimes I'll take another scratch piece of paper and put up a drawing that I really like from a master and just sketch it out real quick. You know, without without erasing or anything, not to try and do anything masterful myself or make an authentic recreation or whatever.
It's weird. Like, I feel like when I was a kid, my mind was so much more geared towards being creative. Like, I felt like I just had so much more access to that part of my brain where I could just invent stuff out of thin air and just roll with it and let my imagination run. And, you know, as I got older, I think maybe I just got like too introspective or self-conscious or something. And it kind of sucks that I don't feel like I have that same access to, you know, pure creativity like I did when I was a kid.
Yeah. Well, like when I was talking about automatic drawing, we naturally do that as children. We just start making a mess with no intention of, you know, selling it or putting it up in a gallery or having the generations look at it with awe and wonder. You know, we just do it to do it. I think as children, we're just naturally drawn to being creative because our brains are so active that we get bored really fast, you know. And instead of being bored and being lazy like we are as adults, we get bored and we get creative as kids. So we just start making things not for the end result, but just for the act of making it, you know? And I mean, I do a lot of drawings on recycled paper that I throw away. And sometimes I'll take a picture and post it online and people go, oh, this is really nice. Why are you throwing all of it away? It's like part of it is just for me, the process, you know, to get that process going. I don't give a shit what it looks like. Okay, yeah, actually that did come out nice. So I take a picture and post it. But the point is the process, not the finish, you know, or the Swedish.
Or the Swedish. Do you think that...
Just make sure you're not rushing at it. Okay, come on.
Oh, man. Do you think that, like, the access to all this information, like the internet and being able to stream any movie we want to see and, you know... Do you think all of the access to this information, like, made us lazy and hinders our creativity, or does it make it better?
No, I mean, I think people are still creative. Kids are still creative, you know, whether they want. I think kids are creative whether they want to be or not. I think they just do it. There's a drive to do it. I think there's a drive for humans to be creative too, but I think we get a little turned around as we get to be adults and think that creative drive means that we should have kids.
Were you really geared towards art from a young age?
Yeah, I definitely was. I mean, I love comic books because comic books were escapism, you know, and couldn't really afford to buy all the comic books I wanted to be reading constantly. So I started drawing them myself, you know, and that's kind of how I started with the visual art that I do. How about you? You were like playing music and doing visual art at an early age? Or?
I started learning how to play piano when I was 6 because, you know, Asian kid, gotta learn how to play piano from an early age. So I had like the musical...
wait a minute. I said right, but is that a thing?
It's totally a thing.
Okay. I wasn't paying attention. I was
feel
taking
like,
a drink of the beer.
I mean, I don't know if this is universal among...
I thought it was the violin.
Yeah, violin's pretty common. Violin and piano, I think, are the two most common.
You get a choice between one of the two.
And I don't know if it's universal. I don't really know if it's universal among every single Asian culture, but a lot of at least the Asian Americans that I know, all have kind of a similar story. Like, yeah, mom put me in violin lessons when I was like 6, and I think there was maybe that stems from some sort of cultural expectation that, you know, you start training your kids musically early on, and it helps develop their brain, makes them more successful.
I mean, you never know if your child's a prodigy, you know.
That's true.
How would you know unless you put an instrument in front of them? Maybe I was a prodigy.
I think.
How do you know when you're not a prodigy? You just suck your whole life.
Yeah, but how many people suck their whole life and have no idea too?
Right. Yeah, this is true. A lot of people do suck and they don't even know it.
I think when I was a kid, I was always really engaged in art class. I was always really into playing with clay and making paintings and drawings and shit. But I never, as a kid, thought that that's what my path was going to be. It was just something that I always did.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Because as a kid, you just do it. You know?
I mean, when I was a kid, I was like obsessed with like the world of like spies and secret agents, and I think maybe deep down inside that's really what I wanted to be. So a lot of my like imagination spark and stuff was like me playing out, you know, these action sequences of being a spy, and I would be running around my house with like a cap gun and hiding behind corners and speaking into like hidden microphones and stuff, you know.
I mean, I think they were pretty hidden if they weren't even there. So here's a good one. Speaking of creativity, as children, you played with things that weren't necessarily toys. What toys did you have as a child that weren't actually toys?
Okay.
I mean, I used to play a drum of Quaker Oats.
Like a barrel of Quaker Oats, or
Yeah, you know,
the cylinder thing?
Quaker Oats came in a cylinder. You beat on it like a drum. It's a great thing, you know?
Well, I had an arsenal of tennis racket guitars.
Nice. Oh, yeah. See, you're a guitar player. I was a drummer. Yeah. If only we would have met back then, we could have had an awesome band
A really awesome band.
singing about boogers. And
You know, when I was a kid, in my parents' basement, the house was built in the 70s. So like there was all of this like ephemera from the 70s still left over well into my adult life.
yeah, cool.
And in the basement, you know, it's all like wood paneling on the walls. On the carpet, there was this sort of like geometric patterned carpet that was all red, brown, and orange.
Oh, yeah, I can see
And
it
so
in my head.
like there was these, you know, kind of big square brown patterns with like this big red background. So I imagined that the floor was, the red parts were lava and the brown parts were the rocks that you could safely step on. So whenever I went down in the basement is also where all my toys were.
Okay.
So when I went into the basement, I was immediately in like a subterranean lava layer kind of thing. And I had to jump on the brown parts of the carpet to get to the safe zone where I could, you know, set up a G.I. Joe base or something.
World,
yeah.
You know. Oh. So you were doing your spy stuff down in the basement in your creative world? Hopping from rock to rock, you know?
I was. Yeah.
I mean, you know, a good secret agent should be able to hop from rock to rock over lava. We've seen that happen before.
I had sort of hybrid worlds that I made out of Legos, G.I. Joe stuff, and this thing called Constructs. And 80s kids will know what Constructs is. Constructs was like this... Constructs was like they were kind of like Legos. They had like these connector pieces and these sort of long...
Okay.
Yeah.
And sort of got it in
and
my
I think
head.
the world Constructs lived in was sort of in space, sort of not.
Okay.
You would make these kind of like geodesic shapes, and you know, maybe there was like a moon
Sputnik kind of stuff.
Moon rover kind of vehicles and stuff that you made. So I built like a base out of Constructs, and my G.I. Joes and my Lego people all coincided there and fought each other, you know, in brutal wars and stuff like that.
See, I was a dumb kid because I'd go over to my cousins and they had Legos, but I would just try and make a bigger square out of the smaller squares. And it was difficult. It was because they were poor kids too. They just had a big box of mix mashed. I'm gonna coin that term. Mix mashed Legos that you really had to, you know, spend some time making a perfect square out of smaller squares.
What was like the first piece of creative art or something that you made that you can like identify as being such?
One thing I remember is that I think it was first grade, and our first grade teacher had everyone draw their shoe, and I did a perfect photographic. I mean, in my mind, it was a perfect photographic representation of a shoe, but I'm sure it wasn't, you know, but I remember it was really good, and my teacher was super impressed, and she put it at the top of the you know, she pinned them all on the board, top to bottom, and I was at the very top. She was like, "Oh, this is just amazing," you know, and I thought, yeah, I can do that, you know. So it's funny because I do photo representational tattoos, and it's funny that even at that age, you know, I kind of had a bit of a knack for it, you know. How about you? What was your first artistic memory?
I mean, I always had to draw stuff in elementary school, and, you'd have an assignment, draw your family or whatever. So I'd draw my dog and my parents and my sisters or whatever. Really, actually, the first creative thing I can really remember doing was the first song I wrote on piano.
Oh, yeah?
And,
you wrote it. You got good enough at piano to where you could write a song?
it wasn't like a full developed song with
Okay.
a verse, chorus, and a bridge or anything. But, when you're studying piano, there's no room for you to write something of yourself.
Right.
Like
Because you're just learning
you're learning
things.
scales, you're learning
Chopsticks and
learning, some early classical pieces. I was studying like ragtime, like Scott Joplin stuff, the Charlie Brown theme song, which is still one of the only piano songs I can play to this day.
Oh, nice. I want to hear you play that sometime. I'll crack the fuck up. That's good.
But there was never a point in and I always thought this was weird about piano. There was never a point ever in my piano upbringing where my teacher was encouraging me to go home and write a song.
Right.
So I remember we had a piano in our basement. I was messing around with the keys. I was practicing, and then my mind started wandering, and I came up with like a sequence on the piano, like a minute long or something like that. And I kind of remember the song, and I was playing on my keyboard the other day, and I started playing it, and it's kind of goth. Like, it's a little dark and it's a little insidious, and it kind of has this like...
Did you have lyrics to it?
No. I never got that far.
That would have been rad.
But I remember when I first played it, I was like, "Holy shit! I just unlocked something. This is like the sequence that's gonna be like a masterpiece someday."
But the teacher is not teaching you creativity per se. She's teaching you the fundamentals of the instrument. I mean, if she could teach you creativity, she wouldn't be a piano teacher.
That's true.
She'd be a piano performer.
It's true. I don't ever remember her playing anything of her own creation. It was always
Probably had nothing,
you know. And piano's kind of a weird instrument like that. I feel like with guitar,
right,
you're more geared
learn a power chord and rip out a song.
You're more geared to be writing your own music, but with piano, it's kind of like one of these classical things that you're primarily learning technique and classics, but you're never pushed to make your own shit.
I mean, I think, it is a complicated instrument, so I think there's a lot to learn kind of before you can really get to that point. If you want,
Yeah.
you can just bang on the keyboards and make some noise, which is valid as well. But, if it doesn't really go anywhere, then it's just atonal. And is that even music? Some people would say yes, of course. But, you had Jerry Lee Lewis, who just banged on the keyboard like a madman, but he knew how to play the fuck out of a piano.
Yeah, for sure.
So there you go. Maybe you need to get to that point. I mean, it's like we're talking about creativity again. It's like Picasso. You look at the blue period and periods around that where he could do representational stuff, but he learned it and then threw it all away and reinvented from there. But I don't know if he could have gotten to that point without knowing the beginning.
In Colorado at the time, they had this annual competition, and all the kids that were like studying piano and learning piano had to go and perform in this like competitive recital thing.
Oh no,
where
terrible.
We'd go to actually the high school I'd end up going to, Boulder High, and on a Saturday, and you had to study like church hymns and classical pieces and basic stuff, and you had to dress up, and there was like, you'd go into one of the classrooms, they had a fucking piano in there, and there would be a team of judges that would like sit and judge you and mark you on your technique and your poise and your points and everything. And if you got a certain number of points, they gave you a trophy.
Nowadays, you'd get a trophy for participating.
Yeah, totally. But you actually had to
actually get a certain amount of points.
Yeah.
So you didn't really have a first place, second place, third place. You got enough points to get a trophy.
Yeah.
Which is almost like participation, but you still have to have a certain level.
You still had to make it. You couldn't go there and bomb and they would give you a trophy.
Right. Which I think is kind of a better way of doing it. Instead of just giving everybody a trophy, it's like, cool, everybody gets a trophy if you actually did something to earn it, you know?
Yeah. So it's funny, at my parents' house, my sisters were all in piano as well. So on top of our piano, there's all of our trophies from these competitions, because they had to do it, 7 and 9 years prior to me. So it's this long standing tradition. And it's just funny that was like an element, because that was the only time I was ever competitive creatively, I think.
Okay. So you don't think you're competitive creatively anymore?
I mean, I'm competitive with myself. I don't feel like sometimes I enter like photo competitions and stuff, just
Just for the hell of it.
For the hell of it. But I try really hard not to think of myself too much in relation to other artists, because it gets really dark and depressing when you do that.
Yeah, exactly. You start thinking about how much better everybody else is than you, and you might not even keep going at that point,
Yeah, and this is one of those things that leads to creative block for me, is like when I start losing, some self-confidence in my own creative ability, it makes me freeze up. It's hard to get that initial motion going.
So you don't think if you did any sort of automatic drawing, automatic writing, automatic strumming on the guitar, that you could bypass that?
I think I could. I just need to try it. And it's just a matter of discipline. And I think what I found over the years, particularly with creative work, whether it's writing or photography or, any of the other disciplines I get into, that it's overwhelmingly laziness and lack of discipline that prevents me from doing work, as opposed to this concept of, well, I'm just having creative block and I can't produce anything. And I'd say 95% of the time it's actually coming from within.
There's that one saying, inspiration is 1%. What the fuck is it?
Oh, the Woody Allen quote.
Is it? Okay.
90% of success is showing up.
Yeah, there's that, but there's the other one where it's like
date your daughter.
No. Not me. He wasn't saying that to me. For the audience, he wasn't saying that to me. I don't have a daughter. Oh, really? I don't have a daughter. He was saying that too. No, right? But that's true for everybody. So anyway, innovation is 1% inspiration and 90% motivation.
Okay.
It's something like that. It's maybe Patton said it. Somebody like that. I don't know why that popped into my head. That's pretty random. Stay tuned next week, and I will have Googled the quote and let you know what it actually is. Right now, you can sit back in mystery wondering what the fuck I am talking about.
I'm doing that in real time.
Okay. I know. Okay.
I'm kind of curious, what kind of a kid were you?
Quiet kid. Didn't really talk. Spent all my time by myself. I mean, before masturbation, I was a quiet kid. Spent all my time by myself. Yeah, I wonder what you were doing. No, before all that, I spent all my time by myself drawing my pictures from comic books, and drawing my own comic books. Yeah, that's about it, really. Didn't really get into making friends and stuff like that until I discovered marijuana and heavy metal.
Excellent combination. They go really well together.
I mean, I still listen to heavy metal. I really don't smoke marijuana anymore. It makes me too paranoid. I'm one of them paranoid pot smokers. It was great when I was a teenager, but then I think certain hormones and chemicals change in your body at a certain age, that about 17, 18, it just flipped, and I couldn't smoke pot anymore at all. Otherwise, I would go fucking completely mental. Yeah, once I discovered those things, then I started making friends, because we all listened to the same music. Back then, nobody really cared whether you were cool or not. Oh, you know this band and you know that band. Okay, you're cool. And I could draw all the pictures for all the fake metal bands that we were starting, shit like that. People liked having me around for drawing metal logos and metal designs when I actually started being social. Stopped smoking pot and started drinking heavily. And that's when you really make friends. And then got into punk rock, and that's when the whole world opened up. Alcoholism and punk rock. That's how I met everybody. How about you? What were you like as a kid? Quiet kid, reserved,
See, it's
mentally crazy.
it's weird. I kind of did a bit of a roller coaster. So when I was a kid, when I was really young, first through sixth grade or whatever, I had a lot of behavioral problems.
Okay.
Awkwardly enough, I couldn't stop talking in class. So I would sit down, and as soon as someone would sit next to me, I started distracting him. I was like, hey, check this out, blah, 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 and I'd be all over the place. And the teachers would get really frustrated. And multiple times this happened over the course of my education. They would stop class and they would call me out and they'd be like, okay. And I was Robbie back then. I went by Robbie. So I was Robbie. Robbie.
Well, I've called you Robbie many times. Mostly
they'd be like, Robbie, what did I just say? And without skipping a beat, I would repeat verbatim what they had been talking about for like the last 5 minutes.
Okay.
Even though I was engaged with somebody else. So the teachers got frustrated because I was getting really good grades, but my behavioral grades, because we got graded on behavior back in the 80s, were really bad. So they tried all this different stuff. They put me on like a behavioral system where I had to, behave the entire day and get like a smiley face stamp on a Post-it.
Okay.
And if I didn't get that, then I would be in trouble. If I got like 5 in a row, then, my dad would take me to McDonald's or some shit.
Okay.
So I was kind of like that all the way until middle school. And then when I got to middle school, that's sort of when like I started delving into like, subculture stuff. And I got really into like The Cure and Skinny Puppy, and I got into goth music. And that was my break. And when that happened, I became quiet. It's really weird. Like I was really super talkative and I was super engaged socially. And then when, I started getting older, I became a lot more reserved.
That was the complete opposite for me.
Yeah, it's weird.
Interesting. Yeah. But I was the same way in class as you were, except I wasn't talking. I was drawing on anything I could find with a pencil, So the teachers would always get pissed. Same kind of thing, What was I talking about? Repeat it back to them. It's like, I was listening. It was kind of boring, so I was like,
exactly,
occupying my time drawing. I think both you and I, not to give each other compliments, on live television, but we were both a little bit ahead of the curve.
I think so. I think definitely so. I was at a higher reading level than I was supposed to be in my class.
Yeah, me
so
as well. Yeah.
I felt like when I was burning through assignments and stuff, I would just read an assignment and like half the time I was supposed to finish it, and then I would just be left to my own devices while everyone kept working. So that's when I just started chatting people up and being like, hey, did you see The Fly? That movie was messed up.
And since you were bored, you were being creative. I mean, all my teachers that told me, you got to stop all that drawing. It's never going to get you anywhere. I wish I could go back now and show them. Kind of got me somewhere, Or if you would have just let me do that, I could have been even further along now.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, no, they stifled me. I think that's part of why we lose our creativity as adults. It's like, I think there's so many different things in life that stifle you. I mean, it's not just bills and wife and kids and job and car payments, which is a bill. But anyway, all these adult things that stifle you. I think there's so many people along your path that stifle you as well. I think non-creative people really don't like to watch creative people create. I think there's a big thing. I think there's been a lot of people in my life that have really tried to stifle my creativity just because, I look back on it, I don't know this for a fact, but it almost seems like they were just jealous, I
think there's a lot of truth to that. I had this teacher in second grade, Mrs. Norton, Gail Norton. I'll never forget her.
All right.
Good God.
What grade was it again? Sorry.
Second grade.
Okay,
She hated me. And a lot of it, I think, was mainly based on the fact that I just was not jiving with her like authoritarian state. She would tell me not to do something. I would do it almost immediately. Right. And I remember one week I don't know how this flew in a public school system. Well, it's a public school system, I guess. But to punish me, even though my academic grades were above average, she made me sit in a corner in the first grade class for a week.
Wow. All right.
And she's like, okay, you want to be a child, then you go back to first grade. And I had to sit there with like my arms crossed, and like these younger kids are looking at me like, who's this creep? You know? And I was just sitting there just like plotting my revenge. Like I'm going to put eggs under her seat and I'm going to set her car on fire or whatever, you know, my mind was coming
that's
up
what
with.
she was doing, was stifling your creativity. And that's kind of what her goal was, is to stifle your creativity, because how do you get a person to fit in this box that you make for everyone else, the same size box? You have to stifle their creativity, you know. And I think it starts when we're kids. I mean, of course it starts as we're kids, because that's when everything starts. But I think so many people do it to us through our lives for so long that I think a lot of people just give up. You know, I think that's why a lot of people think they're not artists, where I think everyone's an artist, you know. Like I was saying, I think it was at the beginning of this episode, even life can be art, you know. Life can be a performance art, you know. But I think a lot of people, they don't even want to look at their lives as art. They just want to, they don't want to be worn down anymore by something that will wear. It's an interesting thing. It's like, here's this thing that's wearing you down as a person, and in order to not be worn down by it anymore, you let it wear you out. Did that make any sense?
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like it didn't make sense. But...
You said it in a compelling way, so I feel like I understood what you were talking about.
Well, that's what we're here for. Compelling talk with Rob and Jack.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Do you think there was like a defining moment in your childhood that led you to the place you're at now?
Jesus, I don't know. I didn't come prepared for this episode. That's a heavy one to think about. It's hard to think about, like, what was that point, you know? I mean,
there was kind of one defining moment for me.
Okay, you did have a defining moment. Okay.
But
okay,
I mean,
okay.
I wasn't so young. I was maybe like 11, 12. And it was the day I quit Boy Scouts. We had to go to the scout camp in Wyoming every summer. And I got in a massive fight with this kid in my troop because he was a racist piece of shit. And he was making the classic Chinese eyes motion to me, you know, and I wasn't having it. And I threw a bucket of water at his head and we started punching each other. And
all races should have buckets of water dumped on their heads.
Absolutely.
I think just as a general rule of thumb.
Yeah.
You know?
It was kind of that moment when I like quit Boy Scouts. I was like, I'm not going to the next meeting. Fuck it. You know, I'm done. And it was sort of then when I realized like my path had kind of shifted.
Okay.
Like I used to be really like adamant in sports. I used to like run track. I used to do all this sort of stuff. And it was kind of that moment where I felt like I was being pulled in another direction. You know, I ran track up until I was like 14 or 15. So I still did some physical stuff. And
Man, that's a really heavy story to think about, because it's almost like you had this experience in this pre-militant group of the Boy Scouts, you know, all trying to make everybody fit into their boxes that they're trying to make everybody fit into with a uniform and code of conduct and all that, and you experience this heinous racism in it. And then I don't know if this is true, but maybe that was the point where you realized that like there's so much racism involved in the that proto-fascist sort of mentality of making kids not be kids, but making kids into robots so they can be real adults, you know. And maybe that was the point where you said, oh yeah, fuck all this, you know. I'm gonna not do that. I don't
there's a lot of truth to that. I think like that's
a really heavy thing.
Like Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts is really cool in a lot of ways because they teach you, you know, all sorts of like wilderness survival tricks. You learn how to like tie knots and start fires, and you learn all this like really like fundamental like functional stuff. The one thing I didn't realize at the time is that I was being indoctrinated into the military at a young age.
Yeah. That's exactly.
You know, my dad was military, and he was a Cub Scout and a Boy Scout, and he saw this path for me, and I think
Yeah, Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts are very.
I started seeing this really ugly, dirty side to like the older people in my troop. And they were just like these toxic jock dudes that were, you know, full of like terrible jokes, and they were all sexist as fuck. And like, you know, I just really realized that I got to a point where I realized I was a square peg trying to fit in a round hole, you know.
And then that was the defining break when you realized that you didn't want to fit into that round hole.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's kind of like you could have. I was going to say that you couldn't fit in. Well, you could have. You could have shut yourself off of who you are and became what they wanted you to be, which I think a lot of people do. But I think it takes a lot of guts to actually not do that and decide to do it your way. You know?
And the years immediately afterward, immediate segue into skateboarding, immediate segue into like discovering punk.
Right.
And it was just like kind of a snowball effect. My parents watched in horror from the sidelines. They're just like, what is happening? And I would come home with like, you know, a spiked bracelet.
I'm just cracking up. In my head, I have this scenario where you discover punk and you're like, wow, this isn't racist.
To some extent, yeah, that was definitely
You
true.
know, I mean, some people get into punk because it's anti-racist. You got into it because you discovered something. Wow, check this out, you guys. This is not racist. You know.
Well, growing up one of the only not white kids in a predominantly white, scenario.
I've heard many stories from you. I'm sure it's very difficult. It was very difficult, you know.
Okay, how about you? Was there like a defining moment that sort of like you woke up and you realized like, I'm going to be an artist?
Not really, man. I didn't come prepared. No, I just, like I said, I just drew on scraps of paper, which is kind of what I'm getting back to now, is just going back to drawing on scraps of paper because I'm trying to get that adolescent creativity back, you know? I'm trying to harness that. So before I started tattooing, I was singing in bands, though, which was like my creative outlet. I don't know. I started growing my hair out because I was into metal, and then we did a lip sync talent show. The rest of the kids in 6th grade that also had long hair, we lip synced to Queen of the Reich by Queensryche.
Really?
Yeah, and they had me on drums. I was a drummer. I should have been a drummer. I got great timing, you know. Started out on the drums, but then they realized I had no idea what I was doing flailing around back there. So the guy that actually owned the drums, he had to play the drums, so they made me the singer. And then I just kind of like decided I was a singer from then on. I didn't do very well, but, you know, kind of just decided in my head that, oh, this is who I am now, you know. I'm the guy who sings. It's easy, you know. Just show up with a microphone.
Yeah.
Don't have to buy the guitar and the cabinet or the drum
less gear
set.
to lug around.
Ah, exactly. Yeah. So the defining moment was when I realized that I didn't need much money to be a singer. Okay, I'll go with that.
Very clever.
Well, what's the saying? I'm drawing a blank on sayings. Necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I got one. Finally. Didn't even have to Google it. You know, for me, it was just like figuring out what I could do to be creative with no fucking money and no resources, you know? Drawing scraps of paper. Cool. All right, that's not really a thing anymore. Okay, I'm gonna be the singer because that, you know, I think I didn't steal a microphone, but I think I just borrowed my first one from somebody. But, yeah, there you go. Yeah. But I think that comes back to creativity and all of that. Is there more creativity when there's comfort, or is there more creativity out of necessity? You know, because during the Renaissance, that's when the Western society was in a more of a comfortable stage after the Dark Ages. You know, and you had a lot of creativity then, and Sistine Chapel and all that. I got a funny story about the Sistine Chapel. We might have to take a break so I can tell it, though. Okay,
Let's take a break.
Okay.
And we're back.
Back from break. All pissed up and pissed out. And left it on the note of the Sistine Chapel story.
Yeah, tell me your Sistine Chapel story.
Well, we might edit it out, but we might not. So I was going to do a convention in a city that will remain nameless. And usually when you're going to do a convention, people will message you their ideas for tattoos. And somebody messaged me, I'd like something similar to the 16th Chapel. and I read it, and I'm like, wait. Oh, I think they mean the Sistine Chapel. And it was interesting because it wasn't a spell check episode. It was because they actually used the numeral 1, the numeral 6, and then a th after it. So they really thought that it was supposed to be the 16th Chapel. And in my head, I'm like, well, shit, I don't know where it is, but it's probably between the 15th and the 17th, somewhere on this planet.
What did you end up doing? Do you remember?
I think I was so not confused by it because I figured out what they were talking about, but I couldn't figure out like a really professional response to that I think I just had to walk away from it, and I was just laughing too hard to actually say I think you mean the Sistine Chapel. Because what if they didn't mean the Sistine Chapel? What if they actually meant the 16th Chapel? And I say that, and they're like, "No, you're an arrogant intellectual snob. Come on, don't you know about the 16th Chapel?"
That is amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah, is that a good story?
It's great.
Laughing so fucking hard about it. It's good. Sometimes you get good stuff.
I'm going to intentionally refer to it as the 16th Chapel from now on.
Yeah, I think you have to. That's all where we're at right now in this world, What are we going to do next, I mean, I was just thinking,
podcast or like in the future.
No, I was just thinking about. I did one convention this year, Helsinki. Normally, I do like 10 to 20 conventions a year, and did one this whole year. So to me, thinking about conventions, it's like, can I go back to that? Will it be like a duck in water, going right back to it, or will it be really difficult to reorganize myself to this regiment of being a tattoo artist and being professional and being on time and being like receptive to people's ideas? Or have I completely lost the plot and I'm just in my own world?
This time is really weird because it's the first time I've ever even considered that the future is completely and totally uncertain. Yeah, like you always go through the day-to-day existence knowing that the plans that you have immediately could always change and something could always be different. But now it's like, I don't even know what next week is going to look like, much less, the next 6 months.
Right. I mean, my birthday's in May, and I still don't want to even try and plan anything out for that. I mean, I usually don't really plan much out for my birthday. Sometimes a tattoo convention will happen around my birthday, and I'll angle it towards that. But this year, there's no way to know.
Yeah. Hopefully we won't be like warming our hands over an oil drum fire while marauders are invading our neighborhood, trying to beat Kevin Costner for the water reserves or something.
Well, if we are, I hope we're still trying to do a podcast at the same time.
Yeah, that's true.
This week on We Can Edit This Out, they're coming through the door. And then just dead air.
Yeah.
There's no more internet. See, okay, here's the thing is I'm always going to screw up the name of this show depending on how I'm using it. Sometimes I'll say we can edit that out, and sometimes I'll say we can edit this out. So if our dear listener has noticed that sometimes I will say one thing or the other, it's because I just don't give a fuck.
Likewise.
Yeah, cheers to that. Hey, we need to on-air cheers again.
There we go.
Yeah. Nice one. So, I don't know. I think the first half of this went pretty good. We do a little bit of a wrap up.
I feel the same way about my life.
Really? Because I think the first half was like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah, I know. It's a bad joke. Actually, the second half has been phenomenally better than the first. But
Would you go back if you could? That's the thing. People my age, they're always sitting around talking about how they wish they could go back with what they know now, you know? And I get so bored of hearing people talk about that. That's why I'm talking about it, because it's so interesting. But no, for real, would you go back with what you know now?
I don't think so, because I couldn't have known what I know now had I known anything back then.
Because there are knowns and then there are unknowns.
Yeah.
And there are known knowns and there are unknown
No
unknowns.
Is that George W. Bush? So he said that?
No, I think it was actually the other guy with the glasses.
Donald Rumsfeld?
Yeah,
It was Donald Rumsfeld.
I'm pretty
Right.
sure it was Rumsfeld.
You're
Yeah.
totally right.
Dumsfeld.
Remember back in a simpler time when Donald Rumsfeld and George W. Bush were the worst things we could have imagined?
Yeah, for real. Yeah.
They still are. I'm joking.
No.
I think that's a weird thing. Like, I never was much for pining for the old days, because I look back and I remember when I was 20 and realized what a dumbass I was back then.
Right.
You know? And like, I'm in a much better place now, but sometimes I do wish I would have like used my 20s to a better advantage.
Right.
Rather than being passed out in a series of bars and, you know.
Yeah. See, I wish I would have never hit that creative lull where I stopped drawing, because I was more worried about making a life for myself. You know, I wish I would have just kept drawing and drawing and drawing. Who gives a fuck if it's going to be lucrative or not, you know? I mean, that thing we were talking about.
Yeah.
It's like losing your creativity because of adult expectations and trying to regain it back. And where does creativity come from? You know, it comes a lot from childhood, and it comes a lot from, you know, necessity and not being comfortable in life. But sometimes it does come from comfortable places in life. And I don't know where I'm going with that.
It sounded good and compelling, though.
Creativity. You never know.
You never know. All right. Well, a lot of really
Covered some good ground.
covered some good ground.
Yeah.
Learned a little about each other. This was great.
I think coming back to what I was talking about with the future, I think I would like to know where this creativity, not necessarily yours or mine, but creativity in general, where that leads into the future, you know, or I think I'd like to talk about that next episode, you know, and maybe we just talk about straight up the future, talk about like 70s sci-fi movies and shit like that, you know.
All right. Well, until next time, dear listener, the one person that's still hanging on after 5 episodes.
Signing out. We're signing out.
Tuning in and dropping out.
That's it. This has been Jack and Rob. We can just we can just cut it there.
I think that was good.
That's a good one. That was a good outtake.
Let's quote while we're ahead.
Well, we should probably listen to it again.
All right. Until next time. Ciao.
We can edit that out! We can edit that out! We can edit that out!
If you like what you hear, please find us wherever you get your podcasts from. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please hit that subscribe button and give us a rating and a review if you like. It's great for us as well. You can find us on Instagram at
We can edit that out _ podcast.
Yeah, but could you say that with like feeling instead of like you're a robot?
Really? Was that robotic?
It was a little robotic.
Okay. We can edit that out. Underscore podcast.
That was much better.
Was that too much?
No, it was great.
I put too much into it.
It was
didn't
exactly what I was hoping for.
I think it was too much.
No. I think that's what's going in.
I don't know.
I think it was good.
I gotta back that up a little bit. Let's do the Facebook. Maybe I can find a medium ground on the Facebook. Okay. You announce the Facebook and then I'll sing it, but less.
Okay, you can find us on Facebook at
We Can Edit That Out.
So that was better.
That was kind of boring.
No, but it was better.
Was it better?
Yeah,
Okay,
the first one was shit. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're doing with the first one, but that one was at least.
Okay. Let me get a little Howlin' Wolf on the next one. Okay, do the email one.
Okay. You can also email us at
WCTO podcast@gmail.com.
That was good.
How was that?
It
Was
kind of
that-
had like a Tom Waitsy thing going.
I was
good.
going for more Howlin' Wolf. I hate Tom Waits. Yeah.
You
I
hate-
don't know. I don't
You
hate
hate
Tom
Tom
Waits. I
Waits?
don't hate Tom Waits.